Protests around the country are sparking a debate about whether the President of the United States can send in the military or the National Guard to help control the crowds. Joining us now, Kevin Carroll, U.S. Army veteran, national security attorney, partner at Wiggin and Dana, has served our country in a few other ways as well. Kevin, we appreciate you being with us. In terms of what we're seeing right now in D.C., the mayor has asked non-D.C. National Guard members who were here, we're thinking about folks from Utah and others who were brought in after the unrest over last weekend and through the week, to leave. Can she do that? And what is the law of the land right now as we look at the Lincoln Memorial?
Leon, thanks so much for having me on. The D.C. National Guard has a unique legal status. In every state in the Union, the state governor is the commander-in-chief of the Guard, but D.C., of course, is not a state. So actually, the president is the commander-in-chief of the D.C. Guard. He delegates his authority to the Secretary of Defense, who in turn delegates it to the Secretary of the Army to run the D.C. National Guard. So strictly speaking, she does not have the authority to order the National Guard units of other states to withdraw from the district. That said, using troops in the city over the objections of the mayor is fraught, and you would hope that the mayor and the secretaries and the president are able to work it out, and that the individual guardsmen themselves don't become a football here. There was the reporting in the paper that they were turned out of their hotel, and that's
that was the Utah National Guard, and a lot of others were turned out of their hotel after 12-hour shifts on the line with thunderstorms and pouring rain and then 80 or 90% humidity. As we look at the crowds right now, what law covers what the National Guard can and cannot do? We saw the military police come in and surround the White House for a while as well. Are they essentially deputized as police officers, or what are their rules? So the Insurrection Act has not been invoked, nor should it be, I think. So currently, they are there to do what's called defense support to civil authorities. So they have to act at the direction of the civil authorities. So they should not be doing anything that law enforcement, whether that's local law enforcement or federal law enforcement, is asking them to do. I was taking a walk around the Lincoln Memorial, I believe it was yesterday, and you saw groups of National Guard walking around without weapons, without riot shields, conceivably somewhat exposed, for lack of a better term. Do they have the right to defend themselves?
So they have no more or less of a right than any other American to protect themselves from violence. The decision was made by the Secretary of the Army to have them not bring weapons and ammunition into the district. And I think that was a correct decision. It's really hard to foresee a circumstance here where it would be necessary or helpful for the U.S. Army or the National Guard to use lethal force.
There was a discussion earlier in the week about the potential of bringing in the 82nd Airborne or the 101st Airborne. Talks about that. We know Senator Cotton's op-ed in the New York Times that's taken on a life of its own as well. The Defense Department and the President have sort of backed off from this idea of, quote-unquote, sending in the troops. You think that was because of a legal reason or because the crowds have quieted and it's just not required?
I think it's the latter. Under the Insurrection Act, the President would have the authority to do so. However, it would have been politically unwise for them to do so. I respectfully disagreed with Senator Cotton's op-ed, although I have a lot of respect for his service as an Army officer in Afghanistan and Iraq. There's risks for the individual soldiers, there's risks for the military as an institution, and there's risks for the Republic, small r Republic, when you have a federal military force potentially using force against citizens.
You're a student of history, and I want to get your thought on this just before we go. What do you make of the former military leaders, big names in American history from Mattis on down or on up, depending on how you look at it, Powell, revered names coming out, speaking so forcefully about President Trump in a negative way? Have we ever seen anything like that of former military members taking such a political stance about a domestic issue?
Sure. Just recently, there was what was called the Revolt of the Generals, circa 2006, when a lot of retired general and flag officers had serious criticisms they made public of our policy in Iraq. I think that it was proper and correct for Secretary Mattis and the other former secretaries and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, combatant commanders to speak out. It's very unusual for them to do so, but last Monday was an unusual situation. And I think that it was appropriate for them to speak.
We're taking a look now at live pictures of Chicago, where there are crowds gathering 18 minutes before noon there. Kevin, your insights are appreciated on this. And obviously, we are in uncharted territory, which makes your expertise even more needed and more appreciated. Admiral Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, on Fox News Sunday tomorrow with Chris Wallace. We'll obviously hear what he's said in light of your thoughts. Kevin, we appreciate it. Thank you.